Richard Russell was a young man from Florida who, at the age of 7, was given the nickname Beebo, which kind of stuck for the rest of his life. He was a very good, or fairly good, athlete and wrestler in his high school years, but as he moved into college, he kind of fell through with that, so gave up on pursuing that. He would meet a girl who he would go on to marry and would run a bakery with her for 3 years. But again, he would move to work with Horizon Airlines, specifically their Alaska branch. This would be sort of the one job that stuck. He spent 4 years working as a baggage handler on minimum wage. Technically a ground service agent, but most of the work was baggage handling. He wanted one thing, and that one thing was just to fly. He would spend every working day of the week on the runways, on the tarmac, watching, hundreds of planes a day go by, filling hundreds of planes a day, yet he couldn't go on any of them. He wasn't, he had wanted to, but never, for whatever reason, got the time or chance to get a pilot's license, to get the certain training. He just sort of had that as some sort of passion for him. He wanted to fly. And I guess that built up. He would play sort of flight simulators, and that would be, some form of satisfaction of that need, but I guess that wasn't enough. On August 10th, 2018, Bibo would, during the middle of a workday, steal a plane and take it off, with absolutely no training. This man just played a few amateur flight simulators and succeeded in taking off with a plane. No one was on board the plane, it was simply him. And he would fly that plane around for an hour. This is like a huge commercial plane, right? And the man succeeded in performing a series of thought to be impossible tricks. No one thought this plane could do a barrel roll, and this man did a barrel roll in this huge fucking plane, a dual engine plane. And you can find online the communications between Bibo as he's flying about and the air traffic control, and he's just talking about sort of a realization that he's had. He labels himself a broken guy with some screws loose that he'd only just realized now, and that he's given advice to make sure the landing gears are down, but he says, well, I never really planned on landing. He just made this sort of thing. He just wanted to fly around for a bit. One of the things he says is, I guess I'll fly around for a bit, then nose down and call it a night. He had no intention of landing. This was just a glorified suicide attempt. But if you think about it, this man worked on the tarmac, worked on the ground, and he didn't go up there to die, he went up there to live. You can hear in his voice the amount of fun this man is having. He's living his life. He's recognizing these beauties that he didn't before. There are some specific things he wants to see. He talks about flying to the Olympia to see the mountains, and he's just in absolute awe of just the sights he can see that he hasn't been able to see on the ground, that he's dreamt of being able to see probably his whole life. And the last thing he wants to see is the orcas in the Sound, which is not far from the airport, but he was running incredibly low on fuel, and he notices this. But, unlike most of these stories we hear of some manic suicidal individual, instead of going out in some, shooting and taking others with them, this man simply took this plane, had a whole lot of fun with it for, I believe it was an hour, and then flew out to the Sound to see the orcas and just nosedived. He landed in Ketron Island, which is almost uninhabited. He injured no one but himself. This man simply took himself up, lived more than any of us probably ever will in those few moments, and then, as he described it, nose down and called it a night. He really was a man ground down, and he really didn't see much to do. But it's not so much what he did, it's what he done it for, you know. This is how man, it's man versus self, I suppose, but also society versus self. He felt in such a way that this was, you know, a reasonable man doing unreasonable things, but at least he's with the orcas now, you know. It was the last thing he wanted to see, and it was exactly where he landed, and he took himself out with no one else. And it's rather inspiring, not inspiring to commit suicide, but inspiring to, you know, live. This was what he saw as life, and he fucking took it, you know. This man had no flight experience, and yet from a few flight simulators, did a fucking barrel roll in a giant commercial airplane. As I said, he lived more than any of us ever will, even though it was just for an hour. I hope he was fulfilled in the end, and I really think he was.